Cool. Recording.
Oh,
So,
already?
yeah. So you
All right.
are. So I'm here talking with the Soy Pill. You have a great YouTube channel. I've been checking out some more of your content. Um,
Yeah, thanks.
so I don't know. Like we were talking a little bit behind the scenes. I don't know if I asked you how did you start getting into YouTube? Like, kind of what was the genesis of you wanting to make a channel?
Like, how did I start making stuff, or how did I start getting into YouTube as like? Because
Oh
I've
yeah.
been
Like, how'd you
watching
start?
YouTube since I was 10, but I think in like
Like, how'd you? What made
20,
you start making content?
yeah, 2018. I don't know if there was like a pivotal moment that said like, oh, I need to start making political content or anything, but I started a channel of which I will not name, but people will eventually find, where I would just spout my like dumb takes on media or make dumb memes because I had all these dumb ideas, I had all these opinions, and I wanted to share them. So I figured like, if I type out a Reddit comment that, gets 1,000 likes, I'm like, okay, people like my dumb rants. I might as well make a video about it, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it started. And then in 2018, same around time, I was talking with a friend, and he got me into watching some streamers, so like a Destiny and some other people. Majority Report would like start popping up, David Pacman, and I'm watching these guys, and I'm like, oh, I like this, and I like their opinions, and I have opinions. Like, why don't I start making my own opinion videos? So that's kind of how it started. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like when you realize that you're like, okay, I could do what these guys are doing. It's like, why not then at that point? Like, if you have the time
Yeah,
for it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like the same with me. And listening to a lot of political streamers, and then I'm like, okay, this seems like something that I would enjoy doing. And listening to people and ranting to them by my, like when I'm by myself. And I'm like, I'm ranting to all of this shit by myself or to like my family, friends. Maybe there'd be a spot on YouTube for people that would want to listen to my rants.
Yeah. It's a little I don't know if anyone has ever told you you should do stand up, which is like a very cringy thing that someone will say when you make a joke. And it's like that, except maybe they're right, where they're like, "Oh, you should like, record yourself because I like hearing what you have to say." So, like maybe
Yeah.
there's some truth to it.
And
Or
then
maybe not. Maybe I never should have turned on YouTube, but here
and
we
then
are.
there's
So,
the people that are like, "Oh my god, you're doing a podcast. What is it with every guy thinks that he can do a podcast these days?"
another white male podcast. That's
Right,
what we need.
exactly.
We don't have nearly enough.
More of those. Well, you can be the left Joe Rogan.
Oh God. I don't want to be the left Joe Rogan. I mean, the left had a Joe Rogan. It was Joe Rogan when he supported Bernie Sanders like a year ago or whatever.
Yeah, it did not seem that long ago.
It didn't last very long, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I reached out to you when I heard you call into the Majority Report, and I think that's something that we were both trying to get to, like
Yeah,
actually getting on the air with the Majority Report. So like, what was your so what was kind of your experience with the Trump campaign? Kind of wondering about that. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
sure. Yeah, so I've had a lot of preconceptions about, Trump supporters, and I'm in a liberal bubble. I live in California, so I know Trump supporters. I'm friends with Republicans. Like, I have Republican family, so it's not just this alien concept, which to a lot of people here, it is kind of an alien concept. They're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, like how could you possibly vote for Trump? I just don't even understand it." And it's like,
like on
"Well, go talk to
progressive
these people."
YouTube spaces, kind of. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that and just like, I live near Berkeley, which is the like most progressive
Oh,
city in the
yeah.
country, and it's like, all right, like you guys are a little like bubbled and you don't really understand how things work. So that can be frustrating. But I figured, okay, like I see all this crazy stuff happening. I really was a big fan of Jordan Klepper's like Finger the Pulse or whatever it's
Yeah.
called, where he goes out and he interviews these people, and I'm like, one of my friends was just like, "Hey, do you want to go to this Blair White event in Arizona?" And I was like, "All right, cool. Like, yeah, why not?" And we go, and we're like, "Hey, there's a Trump rally like 2 hours away. Do you want to rent a car and go to that too?" And we're like, "Okay, sure. Like, why the fuck not?" And it was super enlightening because you get there and you're like, "Oh, Jordan Klepper is not cherry picking his videos. This is just every single person you talk to. Every single person is like this. Now, not
Right.
every Trump supporter, I'm sure, is that fanatic.
But
Obviously,
like
it's
the
the
ones
ones
that
that
show up at these events.
would go to a rally. Because I went on a whim to an opponent's rally just because I'm like, let's see what happens. Like I've never been like, you know what, I really want to go support Joe Biden today. And like actually Bernie Sanders, I was like much more of a fan of Bernie Sanders, and he had a rally in San Francisco that I went to. I was bored out of my mind. I was like, "All right, you're just saying all this stuff I've heard you say for 4 years. You're very consistent. That's why people like you, but why am I here? I could watch this on TV. I don't need to show my support." So,
Right.
the people that show up to these things to hear Trump say the exact same things over and over and over, they love him, and they are very, very crazy sometimes. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun. If it wasn't so scary, it would be more fun. But it is fun talking to these people for sure.
Yeah.
Very enlightening.
And it does seem like Trump will like freshen up his routine. He'll add in topical issues at hand.
Sure, like whatever person attacked him last week, he'll
Right.
be like, and Dana Bash, she's saying horrible things about me, So it's, he keeps it a little fresh. But I mean, I went to uh, two Trump rallies. Let's see, no, three. So the one in Arizona, the one in Coachella, and the one in Georgia. And by the time I was at the one in Georgia, it was like, okay, you're saying the same things that you said the first two, like almost verbatim. There's a couple different added speakers here and there, but even the merch that they had outside has the same vendors that are driving around like the country following
Yeah.
him. And it's like, okay, like why do people go to more than one of these? Which, I'm the idiot who did and paid money for it, but
Real. Yeah. How much is a Trump rally?
so the rallies are free. Like going there is free if you can get there. It's the transportation. So
Oh,
like all in
gotcha.
all,
Right.
$200 plane ticket to Georgia, $200 for a rental car, motel for one night. But the funny thing is, they're free rallies. Anyone can sign up, and you don't get a ticket, so there's no guaranteed entry. So at the Arizona one and at the Georgia one, I signed up, waited in line for like hours, and they just like didn't let us in because we're like, oh, we're at capacity, like, and a bunch of people just get sent home. And
Oh
so
my
they're like,
god.
ah, we love Trump. I guess we can't see him today. And it's like, geez, this guy just fucked you over. Like, he didn't guarantee you a spot. You didn't RSVP. This was horribly planned. Like, why are you so okay with this? And at the Coachella one too, they like fucked with the buses and
Oh
people got
yeah.
trapped outside and they couldn't go home. And it was like, this is kind of seems like Trump's fault. I don't know why you guys are so okay with this, but yeah, it's a shit show for sure. They don't organize them very well, but that might just be how all rallies are. I've never been to a Democrat political rally other than the Bernie Sanders one, and that was outside. I don't even remember if there was like a security
Yeah.
checkpoint. We
No.
just went
Honestly,
went to a big field. So
like I haven't been to any uh, Democratic political rallies either, but they seem so boring. Oh, you know what? I was at this one event where it was canvassing in the city near me, and before they sent out people to canvass, Bill Nye showed up and he gave everyone a pep talk
uh, about what?
about how like the world is falling apart and like climate change is gonna just kill everyone, but like we can make a difference by canvassing. I'm like, why is Bill Nye here?
Yeah, he became like a spokesperson for a lot of like progressive policies, and I think the fact that he's like a children's show host makes him a lot less credible to people who aren't on board already. They're like, why is if like Mr. Rogers came up and started telling you Black Lives Matter, like people who think Black Lives Matter are going to be like, oh cool, like this wholesome guy, and then everyone else is like, why the hell am I listening to the guy on PBS Kids? Like I
Yeah.
want to listen to the policymaker. So it's a weird angle, but I get why they do it. He's a popular TV host, so one of those guys is president now.
I know, but it just was weird. It's like all of these people are already here to volunteer for the Democrats. This is like the group of people that at least need to hear your
Oh,
propaganda.
yeah, that's true. If you're already at the canvassing event, you're kind of preaching
Right.
to the choir. Like, what's the point?
But anyway, I thought that was hilarious. So,
That is
I
funny.
have a picture of Bill Nye.
Sad that he died in that hot air balloon accident, though.
Oh, yeah. No, but yeah, I've been like, I wanted to try canvassing with the Republicans at one point too, just to see what it
With
was
them.
like. Um,
Oh, okay. I actually did too. Did you end up doing it?
I didn't end up doing it, but it's just like something that I wanted to do. I'm like, okay, what's the difference? Like, did you work with Elon Musk? Or his thing was only in Pennsylvania, right?
Elon's canvassing?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I didn't look too much into it. I thought he tried to do stuff in all the swing states. I know he was doing that like lottery, not
no,
lottery, give $1 million to people in swing states. I don't know if he was canvassing everywhere, but I'm sure he focused most of his attention in Pennsylvania.
no, yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be interesting. So, like, you actually did canvass with Republicans, or like you did
So
campaign
not
events with them?
actually. I made sure I didn't help them at all. If anything, I was just kind of
Yeah.
wasting their time. But I signed up for more events, and I went to it's called was it Trump team captain training, and what that
Oh my
is they're
god.
like, oh, if you're the team captain, you got to go out, knock on doors, and like ostensibly an organized campaigning thing. And me and my friend signed up. We're like, let's listen in, let's see what the training's like, and we're just like the only two people in there, except for the trainer. And we're
That's
like, where
that's
is
hilarious.
everyone? And that was really interesting because I'm like, okay, like, are they disorganized? Is this just like they have like 80 of these on their website and no one's showing up to them? Half the time the website was broken, so maybe that's why. But it didn't seem to matter because Trump won, so I guess that wasn't like the determining factor that no one's showing up. But yeah, it was really strange.
Yeah, like it didn't seem like the groundwork from the Trump team was that great in this election cycle. At least I didn't hear anything about it. And then
Yeah,
with
but
your
it's
anecdotes,
pretty soon after, right? So like we might hear in a few months about this big, ground game that they weren't announcing as much, or that like the analysis comes out and it's like, oh, like all these voters did a post-election poll and they were reached out to by the Trump calling or door knocking. Like we don't know 100%. Like it might have actually been really good, and that's why he had the better turnout. But I'm just speculating. I don't know.
yeah. And did you listen to that Pod Save America episode with the Harris like campaign staffers?
No, I don't like listening to them that much. They're a little too lib for me.
No, yeah, same. I don't listen to them, but I listen to like people reacting to that, and it is just so
Yeah.
funny. They're like, "Well, we were really down. Like this campaign started on the back foot, and I thought we did a great job of only losing by this much." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're like the Democrats have more registered voters than the Republicans,
Yeah.
and you're proud that you lost the popular vote."
This could have been way worse. Yeah, that's a weird way of spinning it for sure. I think something like that happened in the midterm where they're like, this was a loss, but it could have been way worse. And it's like, okay, like great. Like that doesn't
Right.
help me. This is
And
bad.
I mean, that is kind of the vibe that they're going with too. They're like, globally, this was an anti-incumbent year. You're coming off of the election and all of or you're coming off of the pandemic and all of the inflation caused by that pandemic. So if you look at incumbents around the world, Kamala Harris didn't do that bad. And it's like, we actually stemmed the bleeding by only losing by this much of the popular vote.
Yeah, but it's kind of like a binary thing, right? Did you lose it or not? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And and
totally
also
worthless.
you had a
Words in the wind.
golden opportunity to not be the incumbent because you weren't running for reelection as the president. Like you weren't
Yeah,
running
if
for
you had
president for reelection.
changed even anything a little bit, maybe people would have seen you as new. And I think there was like a 2 weeks where that really did happen, where everyone's like, "Oh my God, like it's not Joe Biden. I don't have to pretend like I care about this 80-year-old man who's clearly faltering on stage. Like it's happening. Like we have a fresh
Yeah.
face, and Tim Waltz, and he's being based. He's calling them weird. He's calling out their bullshit. And then
Yeah,
like a week
exactly.
after that, it's just all like, all right, now we're back to normal. It's like, oh, okay.
Where's
Well, we
Liz
had a
Cheney? I need her now.
yeah, where's Liz and Dick Cheney? Like, where's like let's just turn off the let's be mean thing. Like when they go low, we go way too high and
Oh
forget
my
to be
god.
mean.
But
I
not
don't
high
know.
in the sense that we're smoking weed because that's
Oh
that's
well,
against our
that might be a
sensibilities.
yeah, that might be a popular policy saying you're going to
Yeah,
legalize weed.
we can't
So
do that. No, my
uh,
my hot take this election is if Kamala Harris was like even with all of the bad campaigning that they did, even with the lack of a primary, my hot take is if Kamala Harris was a white man, she would have won the popular vote, at least the popular vote,
I
because
don't think that's a hot take. I think that's
she
actually probably pretty reasonable. I
she,
mean,
she only lost by
go on. Sorry, finish.
1.5%. And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously this is anecdotal, but like, did you hear that whole thing where AOC's like, there were people that voted for me, but not for Kamala Harris?
Yeah.
And why is that the case? And people were like, oh, well, you just speak to me more. And, but like, there's so many
Well,
anecdotes.
that's not a misogyny thing though, right? Because AOC is a woman, right? But like
Right.
that is like a AOC says, I guess, more populist things, or at least comes across as more relatable.
It's more
And
populist things, but also if you look at the reasoning that people wrote it, it wasn't
oh
only
my god,
populism.
yeah.
It's like Kamala Harris doesn't make me, or President Trump doesn't make me feel bad about being a white straight male. It's
Which is
like,
so funny because I don't like I you'd have to show me a clip. Maybe there exists one, but like when has Kamala ever tried to shame white straight males? Like ever?
right,
I think
exactly.
there was one thing. She went on that podcast and
The
someone
Call Her
asked her
Daddy
like
podcast.
Yeah, I think that was the one. And someone asked, like, oh, here's this policy abortion that is affecting women's bodies. Is there even a singular policy like that for men? And
Oh yeah, and
really,
she's like,
really,
no.
there's not. She's like, no, of course not. And there's not really. But, like, first of all, that came off as very dismissive. And a lot of people brought up, like, oh, the draft, which, come on, we haven't had one in, what, 50 years more, like, since Vietnam. So, like,
Yeah.
it still exists, but, like, no one's really being affected by that as it stands. So it's kind of true, but it's also just like that's your opportunity to try to reach out that olive branch and say, like, well, there's nothing equivalent, but like men do have their issues, and, like, try to pander to both sides. It is pandering, it is politics, but if you come across as like that dismissive, then the Republicans take that, they blow it up in an ad, and they're like, they don't care about white men, and then bam, you just lost 30% of the vote. So
Right. And then I like my whole position on being woke or firing like insults at white men or being like, "Oh yeah, I support DEI," and then Republican like that's like feeding the Republican narrative that you hate white people or whatever. My whole position on that is like, if you're not offering anything substantial to kind of draw away attention from you commenting on being woke or not, then it's going to make it way easier for them to paint you as that anti white, pro woke candidate.
yeah, because I think what happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in this campaign, she was a lot more progressive in, like, 2019 when she was in the primary, and once she became the elector, the Democratic nominee, she kind of moved away from all the woke stuff. She didn't talk about really, like, trans issues. She didn't talk about, like, DEI very much. And I think that was an attempt to say, like, oh, I don't want to be associated with this. But the problem is if you don't present literally the opposite. So if you're like, hey, like, DEI is not as important. We need to be a meritocracy or something. Like, I'm not saying she supports that. I'm saying, like, if you don't give the alternative, then the Republicans are just going to run all the clips of you saying those things 3 years ago, and they're like, this is you now. And if you don't say that's not me now, then it is you now, and that's kind of what everyone thought. They're like, oh, you're still woke, you're still anti-men, you're still anti-white, which is obviously all bullshit. But, like, that's how people feel about it. And this was, I mean, I'm not super politically locked in my whole life, but this does seem like one of the most vibes-based elections I've ever participated in. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you're wrong about that. Like, it's a extremely vibes based election. Um, but what I would say is, like, in terms of the effective rhetoric of what the candidate is putting out there, I don't think it's an effective campaign strategy to say, I'm not woke anymore. So all of these narratives
yes,
that the
no, you're
conservatives
right.
are talking about is wrong. And then she, like, devotes time and energy to trying to disprove that narrative. I think, like, a way more effective strategy would be, I'm going to ignore that and I'm going to talk about how I'm going to abolish private health insurance.
Well, yeah,
And
no, you're not wrong. It was the weird narrative where it's like, oh, you
yeah,
want to fucking trans our kids, and it's like, look at these weird people, like, talking about these crazy things. Like, obviously we don't care about this. This is what's important, and that really did seem to work for a little bit, like I said. But then they didn't keep doing that. They should have just kept doing that. But
right.
if you completely ignore it, that's not good. But if you're like, hey, that doesn't seem really relevant. Here's what is, and then talk about things that people actually care about, like, hey, here's how you buy a house. Here's how I'm gonna fix your, gas prices or whatever. Like, yeah, like, that's kind of how you navigate around. I'm not saying she should have come out and been like, I'm not woke. I'm not woke. Look at me. Look how not woke I am. Because you're
Right.
right. That would have been. Then you're playing their game, and then you've already lost.
Yeah, because that's like what she was doing when it came to um, like immigration or the even like kind of the economy too. Like, oh well, yeah, I know the economy's bad, but we're gonna do like $25,000 loans for your houses, or twenty five thousand
Yeah.
dollar loans to first time home
That was
buyers.
that was playing their game, right? Like, Trump comes out and he says, "I'm going to fix it," and she's like, "Well, here's how we can alleviate some of these
Right.
problems, but also it's not as bad as you think it is." And it's like, "Well, you've already, like, made your message too
Yeah.
complicated for the average person. They want to hear my prices are going down, even though, I mean, maybe I'm not knowledgeable enough on this, but I don't think prices are really going to go down. Like, that's how inflation works. Like, we had it, the inflation's down to near target rates, which means prices will still go up, just, at 2% a year or whatever, and that's just how it's going to be forever. We're never going to go back to 75 cent a gallon gas back in, like, the 70s or whatever, because inflation, like,
Yeah.
that it's
Exactly.
always going to keep going up, and that's good because you don't want deflation, because then no one spends, and then you get recessions, and then it's like,
Yeah.
all right, like, I but no, most people don't know that. I didn't know that till like a year or two ago. I was like, oh, let me like really look into how like inflation and deflation works. I just never. It didn't matter. It doesn't affect me to know how that works. It affects me when I go to the grocery store, and
Mm.
that's what people care about. They're like, oh, my prices are higher, and they remember when they were lower. But like, it's not going to go back down. And if you look at our economy compared to all these other like comparable countries, like we're doing way better. We recovered better. Our inflation's lower. Like I don't know. It's so hard because how do you, if the vibes are things are too expensive, I want them to be cheaper, and they just won't be. Like, can you say that, or do you have to lie and say, "Oh, I'll make them cheaper. It's going to be better," but it's not. Like, and then the next election cycle, you lie. Like everyone sees they didn't get cheaper. So, like, I don't know how you win that because apparently the way you win it is just to do what Trump did and said, "I'm going to fix it," and never explain how, and then say, "Oh, actually, it's with tariffs, which is the opposite of making prices cheaper." So I don't,
Well, I
like
think
what?
there are like some things that you actually can make cheaper. Like I think you can make healthcare cheaper
Yeah. Oh, sure, sure,
and
sure. It's
housing
not.
cheaper.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Not everything is going to be more expensive forever. Like, yeah, healthcare could be reduced for people. Yeah, housing. There could be ways, and things ebb and flow. But in general, these things are always going to keep getting more expensive pretty much forever.
Yeah.
Just it depends on the rate, and yeah, it's going to be fluctuating, but it's never going to be like dirt cheap again, unless we bring some super crazy innovation in, right? That changes how we do stuff.
Right. And I guess like the prices wouldn't go down, but maybe if people have more money in their pockets, that would be also a way to do it. But what you're talking about, like how honestly, the Democrats should just lie. Like if they're so beholden to their corporate donors, just lie. Who cares? Like Trump lies. Trump lies and says that he's going to deport like 20 million illegal immigrants or whatever, and that's going to change the amount of money that you have in your pocket. Like, just be like, okay, guys, I'm going to say that I'm going to attack corporations. Don't worry, I'm not going to do it. Like, that's what Joe Biden ran on Medicare for All. And he didn't do anything like that. And he
Did he
won
really?
his election.
Was that one of
Yeah,
his platforms, Medicare for All?
I think he was like definitely progressive on it.
He was more progressive. I don't know if he ever explicitly ran on Medicare for All. If he did, I don't remember, and I feel like people would have pointed that out a lot more. I know he ran on like forgiving student loan debt and
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of
that's
other.
also true.
And people get mad when people say this and they hear this, but like he was one of the most progressive presidents in terms of like going out
Oh my
there and picket
God.
lining for unions. Like he had a lot of pro union policies. He like he the child tax credit, the like eco spending and the Inflation Reduction Act. Like these are all things that I support as a progressive. I'm like, oh yeah, like this isn't nearly as close as I want it to be, but like compared to a lot of other people, like he did more.
No,
And
yeah.
it's not enough. It's lukewarm, but it's like all right. Like I can't pretend like this guy's like literally Ronald Reagan, which apparently some people think. So
No, that's the thing. Like, in a vacuum, I thought Joe Biden's presidency was pretty good. But he had some glaring issues with it. I mean, the genocide in Gaza is a huge blight on his like legacy, and also the fact that he basically set the groundwork for Trump getting reelected. He could have
yeah,
like
if
put
he had
way more
stepped down
teeth.
earlier, maybe or
Okay,
bless
good.
you.
No, I'm good. He could have put way more teeth in his policies and actually tried to push for more meaningful changes to people or to people's lives, like getting rid of student loan debt, like putting
He did forgive a
just
lot of student loan debt, by the way. I forgot how much it was, but it's like millions of dollars he forgave. So
yeah, he
like,
did.
but like no one talks about
But
that,
now
right?
like
Like
Donald Trump's
some,
going to get into office and he's going to basically force everyone to pay for it, and
yeah,
yeah, like at even higher rates than what they're paying now.
yep. No,
But
it's
anyway,
gonna get
like
worse for sure.
in terms of in the context of like a looming threat of Donald Trump returning to the White House, Joe Biden did a dismal job. And like you can
Yeah,
see at the end of his presidency, he pushed to have or he pardoned his son. Like now he's like, okay, I'll stop playing by the rules of the system. It's like where was this energy when you got into
yeah.
office? And you're like, oh well, I guess the Supreme Court says I can't forgive student loan debt. It's not
That's
like
true. I think if they truly thought, if they truly believed, and I think to an extent this is true, that Donald Trump is going to do irreparable damage to our democracy by appointing all these crazy people to the heads of institutions and overturning elections, et cetera, et cetera. then why didn't you just start breaking the rules right away? Because if you knew that if you lost, he was going to do that, you should have just been doing that the whole time. You're right. But at the same time, then you're also playing their game of like, well, now I'm breaking the rules. But if they're already going to do it, then what do, right? Like, if they're going to
Yeah.
do it and they win, you're screwed. It doesn't matter how honorable and noble and goody two shoes you were because you lost. And now those rules might go out the window. So,
Right.
yeah.
And people pretending like Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden is setting some kind of poor precedent for Donald Trump to pardon
Yeah,
people now.
after he pardoned Roger Stone, Michael Flynn,
Fucking
Giuliani, did he pardon too? Like all these people that are like doing all these crazy
yeah.
back alley deals
He's
and
already going to
insane
pardon
stuff.
like Matt Gaetz for
Oh, really?
I
For
mean,
what, being a
that's kind of the
pedophile or?
theory. Yeah, probably. For any
Okay.
potential
Can I
crimes.
say? I don't know if you have to censor the word PDF file
I
on your
don't know.
YouTube, but
Just say it. I
be
don't care.
careful
I
about it.
haven't
Yeah.
been
All right.
I've been like kind of I've been swearing in my like live streams and it's still monetized, so
Swearing is fine. I think if you swear in the beginning of the video, it's where it gets
yeah,
you. But
that makes
also,
sense.
like, my stuff has been demonetized. A couple of my most recent video, I have no idea why. They won't tell me anymore. But I think it's like because I said the word Ukraine. Oh, I just said it here. Excuse me.
Really?
You should actually bleep that. Like, unironically, like it might demonetize you. So
All
just
right.
be
Well,
careful. I
we'll
don't know.
find out.
Yeah, timestamp. But yeah, it's stupid to think like, oh, like now that Hunter's been pardoned, like Trump is really not going to follow the rules. Like he didn't,
Oh my
he
god.
doesn't care. Like this is stupid. Don't get me wrong. I do think it's corrupt to pardon your son after one saying you weren't going to do it, and two for things he obviously did. Like it's like he got caught, he lied on the gun form, he's smoking crack, he's potentially sex trafficking a woman. Like this is bad stuff that we shouldn't be okay with. And I get like, oh, it's your son, but if you're going to pardon your son and you know because of family reasons and you care, then just say that. Be like, look, I know this is corrupt, or not, you know, probably wouldn't say
Yeah.
it that way. But you'd be like, look, I know this looks bad, but you got to understand this is my family. I can't watch my family member go to jail. I'm gonna try to get him the help he needs, and then do some like bullshit thing there. But like, if you're gonna come out and pretend like you're not gonna do it, and then do the exact opposite, like yeah, that looks bad. But in comparison to what's happening on the other side, like I really just don't care.
Right. And like if Joe Biden's going to bend the rules, it's like there's so many more just causes that you can bend the rules for than pardoning your son who is a criminal and did do illegal
Well,
things.
is I think he is trying to like fast track like Ukrainian support. I gotta stop saying it. I'm sorry. Well, now you know it's all in the same spot. He's trying to fast track funding to countries that we're supporting, and that may or may not be like bending rules. I don't know.
God.
I'd have to look into it. But he's doing that because it's like, oh well, storm's coming. Gotta weather up for
So
the 4 years. So
no, but like the rules are just there in place for you to cite them as an excuse for things that you don't want to do, and ignore them when they're standing in the way of things that you
yeah,
do want to do.
it's the pirate's code. It's just a little. It's the
Yeah.
guidelines. You know. Hmm.
No, but
Um.
I was just gonna say like he broke the rules when he was bombing Yemen, and everyone got so pissed off about it. But conservatives didn't care because it's an expansion
No.
of like the American imperialism state.
Yeah, although it is really funny watching conservatives now kind of pretend to be like not hawkish and say like, oh, like Trump, he's the peacetime president, like he's gonna give peace to the Middle East. Because 10 years ago, I was alive for the Bush presidency and watching them, it was like bomb them, bomb Iran, bomb all the brown people, and then all of a sudden it's like actually, actually it's not so good to be mean to people in the Middle East, and Trump is, and meanwhile, he like escalates drone strikes 3 times as much as Obama, like he escalates Israel Palestine by moving the embassy to Jerusalem.
Yeah,
Like
escalate
he's
tensions
not.
with Iran.
Yeah, almost like it starts a war with them by blowing up Soleimani. Like it's like, all right, like is he really the peacetime president because he didn't technically start a new war? Like the technicality is that we were already almost at war or scrimmages with all of these people anyway, so he just didn't have a new country to bomb. Like I don't know. It's
Oh my
such a
god.
silly narrative, and like I want peace, obviously, but it's so like flaccid as a point. Like, yeah, everyone wants peace, but how do you get that? Like, by just
Right.
apparently it's by being strong. I'm strong. Everyone's scared of Trump. It's the Trump effect. Oh, we're so scared he's gonna be mean to
I
us.
mean, what's insane is Kamala Harris did the same thing as Trump. She's like, I'm going to have the most lethal military. I'm focused on our military's lethality. I'm like, who's saying the U.S. military isn't lethal right now? What,
Yeah,
do
I
they
think
all
we
have
need
rubber
more
bullets?
funding. Yeah, and we need to kill more people. That's
Yeah,
really what needs to
more
happen.
audits failed by the Pentagon. That's what I want.
And that's what's so crazy is like so much of her campaign. It wasn't all of it, but like she had a lot of progressive policies, more sometimes even more progressive than me. And then she comes out and she's like kind of pandering to these like slightly right of center people, which I guess is maybe a big voting block. But like, why vote for the guy who's saying, or woman in this case, the military is kind of good versus the guy that's like, the military, it's the best military. We're gonna have such a good military. Like, oh, he's 10 times better than her. Like, I'm gonna vote for him. If you're saying the same thing, but you're the
Right.
diet version, why would I vote for you? So yeah, I think she did need to just
The
go full on
military,
like,
the military is the best, but also I'm not going to do any wars, and I'm going to end all of the wars.
yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that contradiction. They wouldn't have anything to do. He should have pushed that, or he it seems like something he would say in one of his rambles, like, and we're gonna have no wars. You're gonna be so bored. You're gonna be bored of winning. You're gonna be bored of sitting behind your desk and not killing anyone. It's gonna be
That would have
so
been
boring.
good.
Damn, we should work for the Trump campaign.
Oh my god.
Speaking of Trump, though, I did want to talk about. I watched. So we there were two videos I said I'd watch of yours. The first was the left and the relationship with men. So I watched that one. I took some
Yeah, was
notes.
that the
Uh,
Jimmy the Giant
the
video?
yeah, you were watching his video, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched like just the Jimmy the Giant section. So if there's something I might have missed or taken out of
Nah,
context, let me
like that
know.
was a pretty cut and dry section to section, so I think you're good.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other one was the shoe on head video. I literally turned it off in the first 30 seconds. It's nothing to do with you. It's like I just can't stand. I watch her videos and I'm like, I want you to say something substantive, and like it just never
It
happens. It's
never
just
happens. It never
all
comes.
pop politics. And like she's not even necessarily wrong, but it's just saying things that's like, yeah, it's like watching ever the game Portal or like any puzzle game, and
Yeah.
you're watching someone play it and they're just doing it super fucking slow and you know how to do it and you're like you can't help them because
It's
either
all
they don't
surface
want your
level.
help. Yeah, it's all surface level and you're just like, oh, come on, go go go
No,
go
I need to watch more
go.
Jimmy the Giant though, because his videos were pretty good.
That's funny you say that too. So I didn't watch the whole video. I watched what you watched, and I didn't not like it. Like he had okay takes, but it also seemed pretty surface level to me. It wasn't
I would
particularly
say his
insightful.
I would say his videos are like another level of in depth than Shoeonhead's videos,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
but like
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
in the same kind of vein as that.
Well, you even said this when you were watching it. So we'll start off with stuff we agree on. When he's like, men did most good things, and men also did most bad things in the world. When men get together, they are capable of both good and bad. And it's like, wow, that's
Right.
a completely useless statement. Like, yes, I guess.
It's
Like,
like this is
what
a
do you
pen.
mean?
Wow,
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
great job.
And it's like, I think one thing I will concede is that when I say stuff like that, where I'm like, oh, this is so surface level, but then how do they have so many views? It's like, well, okay, this is not surface level for everyone. And I don't mean to shame anyone who watches this and gets something from it, because you totally can. And like, I'm more locked into people who talk about more in-depth stuff. And then at the same time, I'll go talk to someone, like, I have a friend who is just 10,000 times more informed than me, who reads
Hmm.
way more articles and studies and pays attention to like breaking news and like really understands global politics in a way I never could. Oh, I could, but like I don't put the time into.
Right.
And I don't think I'm like stupider necessarily, but I am less informed. And he could watch something that I would watch and get something out of and say this is boring, not because it's boring like objectively, but just because like, hey, I already know this. So like Shoe on Head does provide like, hey, like I didn't know about this stuff, or I didn't see anyone have these takes, and it's entertaining. And I used to watch Shoe on Head like back in like 2016 when it was like the anti SJW era, and she'd make fun of some idiot, right? Because
Hmm.
she's a funny person.
It's
Like,
it's it's content for, I want to say like conservatives, but people on that side,
it's
essentially.
infotainment. It's pop
Yeah.
politics. It's infotainment, and I do a lot of that. Like I'm not gonna like pretend like I'm all high and mighty above Shoe on Head. It's just like I don't like it
No, but
personally,
I'm
and I
just
don't
talking
think
about like
that.
the audience that she's going towards. It like not the type of people, but it's like definitely more conservative
Hey, you just cut out. I can
audience.
hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay. No, I was just saying like it's more of like a conservative audience that she is gathering around her. And
I
I
would say
think,
yeah, because she does like shit on the left more, right? Like the right
oh
stuff
yeah,
is.
for sure. And I would say like you like you make jokes, you have comedy in your videos. Like your videos are way more entertaining than Chew on Head's videos. I have to
Oh,
say
thank you.
you're not just finding like random Twitter posts online from people,
So,
and
sometimes though, I do sometimes do that. But
you're
yeah,
not just
yeah,
doing that.
yeah, not exclusively. I like to think, but yes.
But yeah, like I also don't think your content is aimed towards conservatives and like reaffirming a conservative worldview.
It's not meant to reaffirm, but it is meant to try to convince them that like, hey, and this is we're going to talk about this because of the video, but like the
Yeah.
reason I started the channel was I would see things that were very obvious to me.
Mm-hmm.
So someone says like the concept of a safe space, the concept of toxic masculinity, the concept of voter ID being racist, but watching people just completely misunderstanding them. So conservatives misunderstanding them and be like, hey, I know I don't have to do a bunch of research. I have to do a little bit, get a couple stats, but like I can explain this to you because it makes sense to me. And I know I can make it make sense to you. But the problem is like the the slogan or the like if you say voter ID is racist, it's like how can a physical object be racist, right? But then you
Right.
explain like oh like getting them is harder for certain people in certain areas if they're poorer, and then minorities might be more likely to be poor, and people implement these policies to target minorities, and like that is not transparent in that phrase voter ID is racist, right? So that's why I got into YouTube is like let's try to explain this. So my videos aren't for conservatives, but I do try to reach them more because so much of the left is very like, pearl clutchy and like, oh, you can't make edgy jokes, and like I'm like, hey, look, I'm just trying to be a guy and I can explain this. If it makes sense to me, I promise I can make it make sense to you. But I obviously I'm gonna have a primarily left audience because I'm on the left. So
Yeah. So, what was like your main criticism with my video?
yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me
So
before I actually ask you that. Do you agree with me that Joe Rogan, Matt Walsh, and who is the third person?
Steven
Steven
Crowder.
Crowder are not role models for young men.
No. That was my main criticism because that was the part that I turned on. I was listening in the car on the way to work, and you were talking about that then, and I was like, no way. Like, he must not think this because, yes, you're not wrong that these guys are kind of getting older. I mean, like if we look at them and you think, oh, these are the staple of masculinity, like absolutely not. Like Steven Crowder's kind of pudgy, and he's got that weird chest surgery, and he's divorced. He's kind of a loser. Matt Walsh looks like a soy boy, which is kind of weird that he's like a conservative, but he looks like a hipster from Berkeley,
Well, he does look
and
like kind of a predator that's at your local church down the block.
not nearly as much as he used to. If you watch his old stuff, where he had like the fedora and all that, but now it's a little different. But and yeah, and Joe Rogan looks like a like an egg, like or like one of those people from the Arkham Batman games. I think I've heard, which spot on. Like he looks like the goons, right? Like he doesn't look like I don't know who would be like a
Have you
masculine. Like
read
he doesn't
Berserk?
look. I've seen parts of it. Yeah,
He
is there a
looks
guy
like
that looks
one
like
of the
him?
apostles from Berserk, like mid transformation between a human and a demon.
I think I know what scene you're talking about. Yeah, so these people don't look like these stereotypically masculine like action heroes like a Arnold Schwarzenegger or like Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford older, not like the new Harrison Ford obviously, but like you know what I mean. But what they do all have, and Trump has this too, and you kind of said that this wasn't true, but this is what I think is they have the masculine energy of look at me, I'm right all the time. I'm shitting on these stupid people. I give you that. I feel that need of like almost like a dad role model of this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy makes me feel secure because this guy is the confident one. So even if they don't have the appearance, they have the energy of domineering masculine nature. If that does that make sense?
No, yeah, that makes sense. And I like okay. I'm not saying that they are not. I'm not saying that they are not like popular figures and they don't have a following of men because I do think that their main audience is men. So of course they have a following of men. But
Hmm.
what I am saying is like we need to be specific about who we're talking about because I think like the all of the like little zoomers that we hear about who are like in their high school or middle school classroom saying your body my choice, your body my choice, like in the wake of the
Hmm.
Trump presidency. I don't think they're watching like okay, I have no evidence of this at all. But I don't know if they're watching Joe Rogan when they have guys like Kai Cenat or Aiden Ross or like the Paul brothers to watch or Andrew Tate. Like I think that's a entirely separate demographic, and obviously
Sure,
there's
yeah.
crossover between Trump and all of these guys, but like I don't
Well, yeah,
know
like
if
even
those
Nathan Ross,
guys.
I think, like explicitly endorsed him, right?
Well,
So
yeah,
like
he
any
interviewed
any
him.
of that audience is gonna probably be on board with Trump. You're right. They're not completely like overlapped at all. I totally agree with that. Like I doubt that as many like
Like
10 and 11-year-olds are watching like Joe Rogan 3 hour policy, back and forth on
yeah,
whatever, or conspiracy
like
videos just because
I
it's not
think
as interesting.
I don't know how old you are, but I'm 25, and I would imagine Jimmy the Giant is around my same age because he's kind of has a like I watched his how I escaped the alt right pipeline, and he kind of had
Mhm.
a story where his coming of age kind of matched up with mine. So I feel like guys in your and my generation remember ourselves in high school and college and how Steven Crowder was popping off by doing these change my mind videos at colleges or like I guess Matt Walsh had a kind of a recent resurgence, but Joe Rogan was
Mhm.
way more popular back then before he did his Spotify deal. Um, like that was like what 5 8 years ago at that point, and
Sure, and that might have been more attractive then, because they were more palatable to non-politically tuned in people.
they
I
were
mean,
also doing
me, for
content
example,
towards college kids.
yeah, but no, like I in college at some points, like I wasn't a full-on anti-SJW like skeptic, but I was subscribed to a lot of anti-SJW people. Like Shoe on Head was one of those
Right.
people.
Yeah, the
Sargon
whole
of
Gamergate
Akkad.
stuff.
I was subscribed to Steven Crowder. Now, it was interesting because I didn't know he was like some crazy conservative guy because I watched his video, and this is part of the narrative of like they look for the that masculine, confident, I'm shitting on the stupid person energy, right? Because he shows me this video of some crazy college screaming protester that I think is like, all right, that's dumb, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
can think that's dumb without disagreeing with maybe what they're advocating for. Maybe they were saying like, hey, we should help undocumented workers or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I probably agree with that, but you look cringe, right? It's all the based versus cringe energy. So I'd watch Steven Crowder shit on them and I'd be like, haha, yeah, they're dumb. And then finally, after like a month or two of subscribing, he comes up with some video. I think it was on A Quiet Place, and it was like, oh, The Quiet Place is actually a secret conservative anti-abortion. Like,
Oh
and I'm
my
watching this and
god.
I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is so stupid. And I just like immediately unsubscribed. And then
Interesting.
later I learned like, oh, this guy's like super conservative,
Mask off
and
moment.
not even mask off, just like, oh, like this guy's politics are just dumb. But like, it's so easy to just look at a clip, then have a guy say that is stupid, and be like, yeah, okay, that is stupid. But then you hear them actually tell what they think, and you're like, oh wait, I completely disagree with you.
Yeah.
And just to hammer that point home, I was subscribed to James Alsop for the exact same reason. Do you know who that is?
No. No. Who is that?
So he's like a neo-Nazi, and like I didn't know this. I watched him, like, hey, look at this dumb blue-haired lady, and I'm like, haha, yeah. And then it's like, oh, this guy is at Charlottesville, like sea heiling and saying we need to kick out all the non-whites, and I'm like, holy shit, like, how did I get subscribed to that? Because my politics haven't changed that much. Like
Yeah.
I was more, I guess, slightly more idealistically progressive when I was like 14, and like as I've gotten older, I've been like, okay, like before back in when I was 20, I might have been more mad at AOC for trying to work within the system, and now I'm like, that's great that she's doing that. Maybe she can get some stuff done.
Yeah.
That's how much I've changed. Very little. But like, how the hell back then was I subscribed to a neo-Nazi? Well, it's like, well, they projected this like confident, domineering, I like watching someone shit on someone else energy, and I didn't see the other stuff. And once I did see the other stuff, I got out, so great for me, but a lot of people don't. And then that's all you need to slowly get these people hooked in. So when you say like, oh, people looking up to Matt Walsh, they need psychiatric help. Like, yeah, I don't think you should look up to Matt Walsh. I think he's a person with terrible politics. He's a horrible person. But the people that do look up to him either started off where I was, where you're watching them shit on people they don't like because, you see, I don't know, Robin DiAngelo's stupid, like, woke DEI trainings that are way more than what I would do for just getting everyone on board with diversity. And you're like, yeah, that's dumb. And I saw that in a theater. I saw Matt Walsh's movie in a theater. What else does he have to say? And that's how they get hooked in. And like, well, he's never admitted fault. He never says I'm wrong. He's always just like, yeah, like these guys are dumb and I'm right. And that energy just talks to so many people, and that's why people love Trump. I don't think, have you ever heard Trump say like I'm sorry or I was wrong or anything?
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
that's half the reason people listen to him. So it's not just the masculine like appearance, because that guy, like, yeah, Trump is a big fat like old guy. So it's not like they look up to him physically, but
Well,
it's
he's
the
tall,
never
so
admitting you're
maybe
wrong.
they look
Well,
up to him
not as
physically.
tall as he says. He says he's 6'3", and he was standing next to the what Prince William, who's also 6'3", and he's definitely shorter than
Oh,
him. But the point is, yeah, it's not about the physical like nature of him. It's about the Teflon Don. I'm never wrong. Like, look how cool I am. It's that energy of, well, this guy's right, and that's why there's so much worth in humiliating people like that. Because when you humiliate these figures, these like big masculine figures, and you're like, look at this fucking idiot, like, and his big butt pokes out when he plays tennis. Those same people who latch onto him for being the domineering masculine figure are like, oh wait, like he can be lame. Well, I don't want to support that guy anymore. So I think
yeah.
that's why the weird stuff works so well. It's like, look at these stupid weirdos. Like, look at these guys like talking about like transgender illegal immigrant surgeries and eating cats, and like this is so insane. Like, these people look stupid. Like, calling people cringe, it's not an argument, but it works. Like, it really works for a lot of people, and I think we should do it more.
Right, and that's kind of like my whole general idea of debating too. You're not actually trying to give your ideas to people. You're just trying to humiliate your interlocutor and make his audience cringe at the idea of like, oh my god, he got wrecked in a debate. I'm not going to watch him anymore. And
It
then
depends on the
maybe,
context, but I do agree for a lot of
yeah,
debates, like online debates, 100%. I mean, there's good faith debates, there's bad faith debates. Right now, like, you and I probably disagree on a fair amount, but like I wouldn't be trying to humiliate you,
oh yeah,
unless
I
I
wouldn't
really thought it
consider
would
this a
help, right?
debate or anything. Like
Sure, this
obviously,
is
if
just a
you're
conversation.
if it's more of like a like an antagonistic conversation and you're like going into the enemy's lair or whatever.
Yeah, like, but the reason I say that, I like right before this conversation, I recorded my new video, which is going to be like how to talk to a Trump supporter, which is also a way to just talk to anyone. It's not just for Trump supporters. And
Yeah,
if you're in a one-on-one conversation with someone and you're genuinely trying to make yourself seem reasonable, like, you're not trying to humiliate them. You're like, hey, like, this is what I believe. Here's what you believe. I know that I can represent your position too. Like, I'm not misunderstanding you. Like, there's a lot of compassion and empathy that can go into that. But yeah, if you're like on a Pierce Morgan panel and someone's yelling at you, like, yeah, make them look stupid. But there's a time and a place for it, for sure. And in politics, it's 100% like against Trump. Like, don't give him the, like, the good faith, like, oh well, benefit of the doubt, or let's let him speak. Like, no, make him look like an idiot. Like, because that's what gets people to be like, oh, maybe he's not so cool. Maybe he's not my guy because he looks dumb, and I want the not dumb person. Like, sometimes it's that simple, unfortunately.
yeah. And then just to like get back to like the men versus women thing and why are men gravitating to conservatism. Like I do understand what you're talking about where conservatives have rhetoric that is appealing to men because it's kind of empowering to men, and when men feel like they're not empowered in their everyday life, like they can't afford a car, they can't afford to like live on their own, they can't afford to go out on dates with women and try to like start a family, they kind of need that empowerment. And instead of being drawn towards any meaningful change from like what a Democratic candidate might offer, they might be drawn towards what Trump says, where he just shits on women all the time, calls Kamala Harris a low IQ individual, brags about sexually harassing women, like has this history of sexual assault. Like that is kind of a message that could be empowering to some people. Like, do you get that vibe at all where it's like conservatives are actually offering men a little bit more empowerment over their peers? And instead of like giving men more stuff, it's like taking away rights from other people.
I think this is really multifaceted. So, on one hand, I don't think conservatives are like offering specifically men anything. Like, if you look at like a men's rights activist or whatever, which, by the way, like, there's nothing wrong with men's rights, like, in principle,
Yeah.
intrinsically. Like, if you're saying like,
Feminism.
yeah, like, if you said, well, yeah, people would be more on board with feminism if they knew that most feminists probably want that equality too. But
Right.
if you looked, oh, the court system or the divorce court, like, it favors women more than men, and maybe there could be some balance there or something like that, right? If they were offering that, then I'd say yes. But I can't think of a policy where they're like specifically targeting the male demographic. What they're doing is there's a narrative on the left or from democratic circles and liberal circles and progressive circles like, hey, like this is true by the way, men have been disproportionately privileged in certain areas, or men have it easier here, here, and here, or men don't have to worry about these abortion laws, but women do, right?
Right.
And the problem with any of those conversations is that if you already know what they're talking about, like me and you, it makes perfect sense. It's like, yep, that's all true. Those are all facts. I can go show you how that all happens and how it affects women more. But if you're not, and you hear men are privileged, and you're just a guy who's struggling, and you're like, well, how? Like, I'm struggling, and women around me are struggling too. But like, why should their struggle matter more than mine? And like, all Republicans have to do, if you don't explain that well enough, is say, no, no, I don't, no, that's not true. Your struggle means something to me, and that's
Well,
it. And then
it's the Black Lives Matter of gender politics, basically.
exactly. That's exactly right. Because Black Lives Matter is, hey, police are shooting us. This sucks. Let's do something about it, right? But when that slogan came out, everyone's like, Black Lives Matter. Well, all lives matter. Like, what? Why are you singling out black people? I don't understand what you're talking about. And that slogan just like diffuses the conversation right away. So yeah, it's that's a huge part of it. The
Reactionary politics. That's what it is. They're reacting to
yeah,
progressive changes.
right. But it's also, I mean, it is an issue with the messaging, right? Because I think it's so stupid. The sound, it's dumb. Don't get me wrong. Like it's dumb that we have to do this. But if you had come out, I swear to God, this would have changed the whole movement and just said, "Stop killing black people." If that was what it was called instead of Black Lives Matter, I guarantee you, like, because even though the same emotions would have been evoked in the like people, they'd be like, well, yeah, like well, I'll stop killing all people. Like trying to argue about that, I feel like would have been so much better. Or maybe like, obviously you could say like, stop killing all people. But if it's like, police shouldn't kill black people, or like, something like that, where it's like, in order to talk against that, like you have to fight that like very blunt, obvious framing. And yeah, you could have called it, police shouldn't kill people, but then you're not focusing the fact that it's disproportionate, blah, blah, blah. The point is the messaging can really get to people. And it's very unfortunate that you have to play that game, but you do, and people care.
The thing
Now
is,
you were,
oh yeah,
I'm sorry.
like just to get to that, I don't think you do need to play that game, and I'll kind of defend that statement. So first of all, when you're talking about a campaign, I think that the campaign, we both agreed Kamala Harris isn't like Black Lives Matter. She's showing up wearing a BLM shirt. She's like wearing one of those like Palestinian scarves. She's not talking about that kind of stuff. She's campaigning on pretty bland, banal policies, and the
Yeah,
Republican, like, I think we agreed if she was more populist in her messaging, then she wouldn't have to interact with that. Like, are you woke or not? Did you endorse trans surgeries for people in like detention centers or not? Like, sure, maybe those questions would still be asked to her in like interviews or debates, but that wouldn't be the what the media is talking about. And if you have a strong enough message, the media is going to shift to focus on that message. And I go back to 2020 when people were like, defund the police. Like, we literally want the police to not be funded anymore. And I looked and I watched Fox News and they're like, oh my God, like people are actually calling for the defund of the police. Like, what are we going to do? And like, they were taking it seriously. And all of a sudden, now they're engaging in the progressive framing of the situation. It's no longer, well, black people do more crime proportionately, so like we should racially profile them, or of course they're going to die at higher numbers. Now it's, we need to defend the institution of police. Like, they're playing defense now.
I actually I have to disagree there. I think it was the opposite. Like, yeah, they bought onto the framing, but like that was another phrase that is so, it means so many different things to so many different people that just inherently hearing defund the police is now like you have to distance yourself. Like Kamala had to come out and say, I never called for defunding the police, or I don't want to get rid of the police. Same with Joe Biden. Like, actually, I gave more money to the police. Like, I think that was Republicans winning that framing. And the reason for that is because on one side of that spectrum, you have people who say, the police are a corrupt institution. We have to completely reform them and replace them with, I think I've heard like community policing or something
Mm-hmm.
else like that. Like I don't, I'm not definitely not fully on board with that. I don't think that makes perfect sense. And on the other hand, you have people like me who say, hey, like, yeah, we do give way too much money to the police and they fill too many roles with all this money. Like, why don't we take some of the money for like the riot gear for the police in like
Yeah.
Albany, New York, who never use it, and put that towards social workers? So when some like schizoaffective person gets the police called on them and they're not being violent, someone who knows and is trained how to deal with that shows up. Like that is such a reasonable argument. And if that's how you present it to a Fox News person, they're going to be, struggling to say like that's a bad idea. Versus if you say defund the police, now they're like, oh, this insane person wants to get rid of the way we enforce laws. Cool, I can just dismiss them entirely, and you're going to lose like a gajillion people off of that one phrase. Like
Yeah,
I
but
think that was really
I don't
bad.
think they were dismissing them entirely. Like they were forced to actually talk about like people actually wanting to defund the police. And I do think like even though you had Democrats being like, I don't want to defund the police, there was a I think in that point in time there was like an Overton window shift where we're not talking about police reform anymore. Now it's like you're talking about the removal of this institution essentially. And if you do say, well, I'm very nuanced in this, I just think the police get too much funding, that makes it easier to not even talk about. That makes it easier to dismiss offhandedly because why would you even engage in that situation? But Fox News has this like
Well, because it's
sensational
a more
story.
reasonable policy. If you say defund the police and that's what everyone's
But when
talking
do
about,
Republicans ever engage in reasonable policy? Like Kamala Harris had reasonable policies, and the Republicans and the conservative news apparatus was able to dismiss her policies offhand. They said she doesn't have any policies. Like I don't know how tuned in you were to conservative media, but
oh,
that was
very,
a
and
that was
you're
a
not wrong.
huge talking point.
But that's a different conversation. That's like, okay, like what's the point of being more reasonable if the other side's just going to lie? And yeah, I understand that. But what I'm saying is defund the police is not a popular idea. Like the idea of like literally getting rid of the police. Now, reforming the police or like I said moving more funding around is a much more popular idea. And if you are making the conversation about removing the police, which is I guess what you said, I didn't see the Fox News specifically doing this, but I know that's how they framed it in some
Right.
ways.
Yeah.
That's how you lose people even more. Like I get that it's playing their game if that's not what you mean, but it sounds like maybe you even support that, and like it's just not, it doesn't play well, and now that's what they can use against you. So, yes, they're going to lie no matter what, but don't make it easier by introducing slogans and policies that are just not popular. That's what I would say to that.
Yeah, and I do think there is a case to be made though that if you have someone like Bernie Sanders who like is pushing for progressive policies like Medicare for all or something, that popularity, and I'm not saying like defund the police is popular, but it is a radical idea that was introduced into this country, similar to Medicare for all. Um, that that like policy or that talking point is going to inevitably shift people over because even though let's say like defund the police wasn't polling above 50% at any point, I don't know the actual polling of it, but of course I don't think it was like people actually wanted the police to be abolished, but it was a talking point and it did make people critically look at police departments. And even though politicians were separating themselves from the defund the police movement, they still had to, like Democratic politicians still had to give in to the rhetoric and say, I don't support defund the police, but I do think there needs to be a change. And I think that kind of populist extreme rhetoric is effective at pushing people over. And obviously, like we didn't actually get a meaningful change. Like that movement was basically had its legs cut out of it. But it also kind of goes to my second point, where when you're talking about how
Wait,
progressives,
can I pause you
oh yeah,
before you
go
go to the
ahead.
second point? Sorry, like mental note that because I forgot my second point earlier. But like I just looked it up because you mentioned like what's the support, and like apparently according to Pew Research, like more people want more funding for the police. Like whether that's because they don't think we should abolish them or because they are like, hey, there's too much crime, and I think more funding will help that. Like
Right.
it wasn't just unpopular; it was the opposite of what a majority of people wanted. Like what is this? This is 15% of people said it should be decreased a little or a lot, and the
When was
rest
this
is
poll made?
2021. So this was during COVID when
So
the
right
crime
there, pretty
was like
much.
spiking a lot more, right? But
Yeah.
that's kind of when people were talking about defunding the police because it was the George Floyd stuff and the BLM
Yeah.
protests. And I don't disagree that there can be some utilization of very radical policies to shift the Overton window. I mean, Bernie Sanders, like you said, is a prime example of we were not even talking barely at all about like real universal health care or any of these progressive policies nearly as much until he came in and was a primary candidate and said, look, I am the closest you're going to get to any of these things. And God damn it, I feel like we could have had it, but we didn't, right? And that helps, but that doesn't mean it always helps. And I think defund the police was like just bad, like for most of the conversation. I think that really turned a lot of people off of Democrats because when you go outside and you see, and I've seen this in my area, people running into like CVS or Walgreens and shoplifting and crap, and you're like, wow, crime is out of control, right? Like, it doesn't matter if like your life isn't really meaningfully changed. For some people, it is. Don't get me wrong. Like they
Yeah.
might have to interact with these people, or I'll tell you, in San Francisco, there's like so many break-ins for cars. Like it does actually affect people. And then you hear, you know what? Let's pay law enforcement less. You're like, what the fuck? Like, why would I ever vote for the person that is watching this happen? And it seems like crazy politics, even though their heart might be in the right place and they're just trying to say, hey, this needs reform, or hey, we need more social workers, or like, I mean, if you advocate for like body cams, like that was a huge thing that we have now so much footage of these corrupt police officers, and we can like hold them accountable, not as well as we should, but we do. And like these are the kind of steps that like way more people are going to be on board with than if you kind of push these sometimes crazy radical policies. Which is again not to say that you should never push radical stuff. Universal healthcare is technically radical for our country, but like that helped a lot. I think that really moved the conversation. I
Yeah.
think defund the police did not, but maybe we can agree to disagree. I just think it wasn't nearly that
Well,
effective.
like I don't disagree with you. I think that if a politician came out and said I want to defund the police, that wouldn't be a winning strategy. But what I'm saying is there's a difference between the rhetoric that like progressive groups, or let's just say like groups on either end of the political spectrum, there's a difference between what they're pushing for and what the politicians do. And not necessarily the politicians that get them to vote for them or say they're on their side are linked with that rhetoric. Like, there is a lot of insane shit that Christian fundamentalists do in this country, and Trump is not linked to that at all. People look at Trump as like kind of a cool guy. They don't see him as extremely
Sure.
religious, even
Yeah,
though,
he doesn't hate gay people. He doesn't,
right,
wanna
even
institute
though
Christian
he
nationalism.
gets the support of a bunch of like Christian fundamentalist extreme religious groups in this country, and he actually does a lot of their policies that they want him to do. Like, he overturned Roe versus Wade. That's a huge one. He's going to support Israel. That's another huge one. He's not necessarily like coded as that, but he like bends to their will because they have these like voting blocks and they're extreme, and they drag him over in terms of the policies. And like, even though they're not like being super loud, well, they are kind of being loud with the rhetoric. Like, abortion is a huge rhetoric, supporting Israel is a huge propaganda push. But Trump, even though he like got rid of abortion and he is supporting Israel and he did a bunch of stuff, he doesn't code as, I'm going to do everything that Israel wants, I'm going to get rid of abortion. He doesn't code as that. And I think that that can be something that Democratic politicians do as well. So my second point is going to, like, it relates to this, but it's like, I don't think criticizing progressive communities or like progressive movements rhetoric is meaningful when you're trying to say that that's what cost people the election, or that's what drives people to be conservative. Because there is a disconnect between the progressive communities and the politicians that um, ostensibly represent them in government. There is a disconnect there. Like, Kamala Harris, she tried to distance herself from progressives, and she was still labeled with that. But Donald Trump, he like tries to distance himself with conservatives, and or like with religious fundamentalists, and he pretty much gets away with it. Like, people weren't really painting him as that. So it's like kind of a broader issue with propaganda and how the candidates represent themselves. And I don't
Yeah,
think,
and that is the double standard. I mean, Trump can do whatever he wants, and people will, like you said, project whatever policies they want onto him, whether it's because he's lying and will do what they want, or because they just think that he will. Everyone on the Republican side falls in line, and on the left they don't. Like, and people like try to look at this like this big landslide, but I think what a lot of people were noticing is no, the turnout was just way lower, and whether
yeah,
that was because economic hardship or Gaza or whatever, like people were just not enthusiastic about Kamala Harris, and
and she wasn't
Yeah, like
offering
that is the
change,
double
and
standard.
Trump was, and I think that was the
Yeah,
main major determinative factor in this
sure.
election.
But so your issue is, oh well, we shouldn't criticize progressives because they're gonna
Well,
like,
my
it's not like Trump isn't coming out and being like, oh, we shouldn't call for a national abortion ban. He'll say I'll veto it, or say like I don't think that makes sense, but he won't like specifically criticize that because he knows that'll lose some voters.
Well, I think,
Um,
I mean, my main thesis is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what progressives do. It doesn't matter what like the propaganda or the narrative that, I mean, it doesn't matter how crazy the blue-haired woke SJW people are. If the candidate has a good fucking policy, they're going to they're going to offer change, and that's going to make people want to support that candidate. Like Donald Trump, he offered radical change and people liked that. I think that's why Donald Trump won the election. Sure, it was an anti-incumbency year, but it's actually just a pro-change year, and Kamala Harris
so
did not offer any change.
I agree to a degree, but I don't think that you should discount how much negative framing can just affect one person's position. Like I don't have the data on this, but like just anecdotally, I have friends that vote Republican, and this is like a direct quote from 2016. My friend said, "I voted Trump because the SJWs forced my hand," and I know that sounds insane because it's like, what the fuck do you mean? Like what? Like your video games had like a black woman Nazi in
Yeah,
them? Like that's why you
they
voted Trump?
gender
Like what is?
swapped
Who cares?
Cinderella or whatever. Or
Yeah, and now there's a black Little Mermaid now. Like, oh God, like why does that matter? But the problem is that that matters to people, especially. I mean, I guess this is going to sound a little condescending, but like if you care less about the economy because you're a little more wealthy. Like, for example, I make good money, and when prices go up, it affects me a lot less. So, like, Donald Trump wins. I'm mad for my friends and family. I'm not mad for me. My life will actually probably get better because I'll probably get tax cuts and I won't be hurt by the inflation. But that is not, I'm not a selfish asshole. I care about how it affects other people. I want what's best for
you're
everyone.
not invested in crypto.
Not anymore because I don't like the way it works. But I did buy into it for just a little, just to see what would happen. But yeah, it's like okay, this stuff is my life is not gonna change all that much. But when I was in that like 2016, 2017 anti SJW bubble, I never would have voted for Trump. But I could see how people similar to me, but with a little less conviction, would get pulled into those bubbles and be like, look, my life's great, but all the things I do care about, like my video games and my Netflix TV shows, they're getting a little more annoying. Like I'm slightly annoyed by these political messages, which can be annoying if they're done wrong. I have a whole video about like, look, like if you inject politics and you're like super on the nose, it's very immersion breaking. And so these very irrelevant, like they are irrelevant in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of things, but to these people they're not. These are legitimate grievances, and you have to be able to hear them and be like, look, I understand you, these things suck, I don't like these either, or maybe they don't suck, but like you got to understand that there are bigger things.
Right.
But these people might not know that. These people might not see that, and these people vote based on that. They vote based on whether or not there is a Black Little Mermaid or how far the SJWs are going. So
Well, they're not being
yes, you're
told that
not
it's a minor grievance. They're being told by their political commentators that that is a major grievance. Like there's
right. Right. No, you're not wrong. It is a minor grievance. They don't see it as that, especially if they don't get hurt by the
yeah.
material conditions of other policies. And that's why you're not wrong when you say if Kamala promotes these really, really good policies, maybe she wins because not because those policies are better necessarily, even if they are, but because if people see the material change that those do bring about, I think they care a lot more. Now, stipulating that Trump is not going to probably material change the things in the way that he said they would, and people still voted for him. But people care about hearing things that are going to change their life. You're right. But if you want your life to be changed in the video game and movie sphere, then like it's harder to reach those people. But those people do vote based on that, and that's why those little stupid things do matter to some extent. You can't just dismiss them, even though they are irrelevant.
I mean, what I would say to that is, did Bernie Sanders get coded as like an SJW or woke? Like,
Yes, absolutely.
he
Yes.
did?
Yeah, like especially when and people say this was like the downfall of his campaign, like when he cucked out because there were some BLM people who took the stage and took the mic off him to say their BLM message, and he let them do it because he's a nice guy, and they're like, oh, like I can't believe Bernie is like kowtowing to these BLM protesters when, I mean, like he's just being like, hey, like these people have something to say, let's let them say it. He's not going to like dismiss them. Um, that matters. People see that as weakness. Trump probably wouldn't do that. So like that, you lost some silly percentage of people that are now like, oh, well, you're not masculine enough. Like just to bring it full
Yeah,
circle,
that's so
like that,
funny.
it's stupid, but it matters. And there's a way to dismiss them in ways that is not condescending. I actually, I have a perfect example of this. I actually was going to call into the majority report about this. I probably still will. That's why I was trying to call in.
Good luck getting
Uh,
on.
yeah, well, it's hard. They have so many people, but I really want to talk to them about this and see what they think because like I said, I used to watch, like a Sargon of Akkad or whatever,
Hmm.
and he debated Michael Brooks on the Majority Report about the regressive left. And like, look at all these regressive leftists in their Salon.com articles where they say, um, abolish whiteness or something, just like some silly SJW thing, which
Yeah.
no one serious is talking about this, right? This is a very fringe, like academic, like the concept of whiteness, like this very nebulous thing, which I might even agree with if I read through and saw what they were trying to say. But Michael Brooks sees this and he's like, who gives a shit? Like, do you know what Salon.com is? No, I don't even know what that is. Who
Yeah.
cares? Like, let's talk about things that matter.
Why are we talking
And
about these things?
yeah, why? Who cares? Who gives a shit, right? And I go to like the video, and I'm like, holy shit, I already disliked this. Like, I disliked this when it aired
Oh,
because I used
wow.
to watch Sargon, and when I heard him say that, I was like, oh, he doesn't know about that thing. Well, he just doesn't know. He's so uninformed, right? And 8 years later, or whenever I watched it again, I was like, obviously on Michael's side. He's clearly the smarter person. He's more researched. He's clearly making better arguments. But that didn't matter to me at the time. At the time, I legitimately thought that this person was both bad faith and uninformed.
Hmm.
And uh, if someone ostensibly as I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but like I don't think I'm an idiot. But I was being a moron at that time. If I'm getting like pulled in by that, and that causes me to be distanced from someone who is that intelligent and that good for the left side, then like there's millions of people who must also be feeling that way, who are just getting convinced by, oh well, this person was kind of mean to me, and so I don't want to vote for them.
Right.
And it's like I'm gonna keep saying this. I'll hammer it in. It's fucking stupid, but it matters. Like that's all I could say.
The thing is, I don't know if it does matter though. Like, because there's going to be people in conservative media bubbles, and there's going to be people in liberal media bubbles, and they're going to be like, wow, look at how dumb these conservatives are. They're shooting beer cans, they monitor each other's porn usage. And then there's going to be like, look at how
It
dumb
goes
these
both
libs
ways.
are.
It goes both ways, 100%.
It goes
Like,
both ways. And the thing is, I agreed with Jimmy the Giant and I agree with Hassan when we talk about how like there needs to be progressive media that isn't on its face progressive, but it's just media that has to do with things that people enjoy doing, like playing video games, like, I don't know, stitching, like lifting weights, that doesn't funnel you into this conservative media sphere where Bradley Martin's going to have on, like, I don't know, he'll have on Andrew Tate or whatever. Or Bradley Martin interviews Donald Trump and he talks about how he voted for Donald Trump. Or he does something with Jake Paul and Jake Paul talks about how he voted for Donald Trump and stuff like that. Like, I don't disagree that the left and the progressives and the Democrats can do a better job of making themselves palatable to men. But I also would push back and say that being like being like libbed up in a cringy way, and that's driving men away. I don't think that's true. I think being libbed up is just people are going to look at Democrats and say whatever. I mean, even the most banal things possible, like Medicare for all, and Ben Shapiro will be like, "Well, when you say Medicare for all, that actually means that you want to enslave doctors." Like
yeah.
that's what he says. People are going to like look at that and be like, if you're in this media bubble where you're watching Shoe on Head, you're watching Ben Shapiro, you're watching like Brett Cooper, and they're getting clips to make you outraged at the libs. I don't know if changing rhetoric is going to change their minds. Like, they're already watching conservative media.
So not on its face. I don't completely disagree. Like obviously, if someone just flips positions, it's not like they're gonna immediately leave those bubbles. But it's like how I kind of dabbled on the edge of that conservative sphere, or even was subscribed to a Nazi. When you say things that I agree with, or that seem reasonable, or that I relate to, I'm gonna be drawn in.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're like, oh, like the libs are not palatable to men in some ways, and it doesn't matter, like it does, because if I don't hear, if I'm a young guy, and I want to listen to someone that, just entertains me, I'm not really even politically engaged, and I've got this workout video where this guy's like, hey, like working out makes me feel better, it improves my life, blah 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 blah, and then on this end I've got some guy that's like, oh, working out is fat phobic because you're shaming me for not working out, and like, why would I listen to like that? I don't know if you agree with that. I don't, but like if I heard that, even if I have no involvement in the politics of either, I just immediately go to the one that makes me feel just a little better, and that's all it takes until that guy then says some political opinion. I'm like, well, he's got the more reasonable take on this working out thing, so now I'm going to listen to his political opinion.
Right.
So shifting it and like 180ing, like one pundit 180ing is not going to suck someone out of a bubble, but having people and pundits that do say reasonable things that are palatable to young men or young women or any demographic, you get them in by being reasonable, and then you either with or without politics, and then introduce your politics. That is how you win people over. It's a slow process for some. It's you got to
Yeah.
really work hard to get those entrenched people out of the divot. Like I was in that anti-SJW bubble for a couple of years, but people being more reasonable, making arguments that were more sound, is what won me over. Now, if I watch the Majority Report, and the reason he wins me over is because he makes me feel stupid, because I'm like, holy shit, this guy's done his research. Like Sam Cedar, like is he's done so much
He's
reading
like
and like everything.
lived through the research.
Yeah, he lives the research. He's old enough to have a really good grasp on this. He's doing it a long time. I can Google any of these things and verify it. That's what won me over. That not isn't going to necessarily work on everyone, and that's why you need also things like, oh, someone who's just saying like, hey, this, defund the police. Yeah, I'm not fully on board with that, but like I do think we could do some stuff with moving money around, or we could have more social workers like that. That is important. We do need people like that, and that doesn't mean everyone has to agree. But at the very least, all the left side of the political aisle, it does got to coalesce and pick a single person once the election comes around, because we keep not doing that, and Republicans are kicking our ass at it. So
Yeah. And like we're pretty much in agreement on things. I like my one issue, my one like sticking point is I don't think reacting to the most like progressive and leftist fringe is an effective way to pull people over. Like like
yes, no,
yourself.
hold on. Let me pull in. Yeah, let me agree with you there. I don't think that we should just have a bunch of reactionaries, because that is what the anti-SJW movement was. It was just, hey, look, the left's so crazy. Oh, they're so crazy. I'm
Right.
not like them. I'm skeptical. I'm reasonable. What I'm saying is, being more reasonable, having less extreme positions can help to bring people in, but we shouldn't all just be reacting to our own craziest people in our movement, because that's not you're not
Yeah, that's
being
not a way you
promoting
build a
leftism, you're
movement.
not promoting progressivism, you're just shitting on people that are crazy, and that's not enough.
Yeah, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about where it's like if you have a like a card game YouTube channel and you are like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not really political, but I think this person's like I watch this streamer, they're pretty good." And it's like Hassan or Sam Cedar or something like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think we like I don't know, I feel like we ended up kind of in the same political or the same area of agreement. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think
So like
the biggest disconnect is that we disagree on how important it is to appeal to some of these people in ways that are ostensibly not very important.
well, I
um
the thing is, I don't disagree with you there. I think it is important to have like a gamer that appeals to someone. Like I play video, or hypothetically, if I'm a YouTuber and I play video games on my YouTube channel, that's appealing to people that want to play video games. What
yeah.
I just disagree on is I don't think like leftists should be like trying to get people over on the subject of, oh yeah, isn't it dumb that there's like a black character in this video game now? Like
Yes.
I don't know
Okay.
if I
I
like.
okay. Okay, we're on the same page then. Yes. I don't think that the way that I should appeal to people is by reacting, being a reactionary.
Yeah,
I think that having the opinions that I have. I mean, I have a video. It's called "Becoming the Conservative Straw Man," where I do talk about like, look, there's sometimes where
yeah, I
people
wanted
just
to
go
watch
way
that.
too far. Yeah, you might even have some disagreements, because I literally call out Emma from the Majority Report in that, and I'm like, she said something like, in regard to trans women in sports, I don't give a shit about the science. Like, trans women need to be included, and like I stipulate, or I concede, like, I understand why she's saying this. It's because of inclusion. It's because trans people are facing this like unprecedented wave of hate from the right, and she thinks it is much more important to just be accepting than it is to really give a shit about these
Mm-hmm.
what, like,
Yeah.
40 people in collegiate sport. It's like it's nothing,
Right.
and she's probably right in her reasoning there, even if I don't necessarily agree with the messaging. But I'm not going to make that my primary focus of my channel. I might have those opinions and I might talk about it every once in a while. And if someone asks me, if I was a streamer and I get like a Q&A and it's like, hey, what do you think about this take? I'd be like, that's probably not a good take.
Right.
That still needs to happen, but I cannot make my channel the let's shit on the left channel, because that's what all those people back in 2016 did. And like, how many of those people stayed both relevant and left? Because like, I can tell
Yeah.
you, someone
Like,
like the Amazing Atheist has gotten a lot less relevant, but he did stay left. Versus like Tim Pool did
oh
not
yeah,
stay
Tim
left,
Pool, Dave
and now he's
Rubin.
for the right. Dave Rubin, right? Like, a lot of these people were like, well, if all I do is shit on these people, then I guess I just gotta also be with the people that are also shitting on them, because that's the echo chamber that you just fall into. So, but yes, I agree that can't be the primary focus, but it shouldn't not happen.
Have you been following like the TYT shift to the right at all?
I Not really. I've seen a clip here and there. What really, I saw something this morning, I think, on some video clip of Anna saying like, "Oh, and that's what woke me up." Like, I didn't even see what it was about, but like, I saw that phrasing and I was like, "Oh God, like, is this going to be another Dave Rubin situation?" Maybe not, but the fact that Cenk is like, "Well, Elon Musk, he liked my tweet.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
we're working together." I think we mentioned this, but like, I super hope they're just taking advantage of like these narcissistic people who just want yes men around them, and they don't genuinely think they're going to make like inroads. The
I
same
don't
with
know.
Bernie and RFK. Like, hey, look, if RFK is promoting something I agree with, I'm gonna be on board. I just don't think you should give credence to these pretty insane people just because they have one good idea. I think you can help push for that idea, but
No, yeah, I want
don't.
to. I want to count on
Yeah,
Shank being self-aware. Like a few weeks ago on Thanksgiving, he famously said, "I am the left," and Sam Cedar's a grifter.
Sam. People, I can't believe anyone calls Sam a grifter, because of all the people I know, even like, sometimes he has people on his show that are like a little more radical, but like, Sam is so like genuinely just like, I don't know, himself. Like, he's just
Oh my
that.
god, yeah, it's like
I
the
have a lot of
least
older
griftery
Jewish
show.
relatives like him, yeah, and he's
Oh
just so like, yeah, it's just the like, oh, this is what's going on here, It's very just like, this is doesn't make any sense to me. Like, he's never in on the moment. He's never on the bandwagon. He's like so out of touch for so many
right.
things. Like, he just believes what he believes and does research, and that's why I like Sam specifically so much. And I think Michael was the same. Um,
Yeah, I've seen like
yeah,
I didn't watch Majority Report when Michael was still around, but I've seen some clips and he's great.
yeah,
But
tragic
anyway,
loss.
the reason I bring up the Young Turks is because Chank recently, like he had a debate with Hassan. He does a debate
That
with
was their
Hassan,
Thanksgiving
yeah, every
stream. Were
Thanksgiving,
they
and
over for Thanksgiving? Like, they Thanksgiving, because he's his uncle, right? Like, they're
yeah,
related.
yeah.
Okay.
So they called it Chanksgiving. Which
Ah,
but anyway, like his point. So they argued about trans people, and Chank's point is like the majority of Americans don't support trans women playing in women's sports. So we need to address that, abandon that position, like support trans women everywhere else. And that's why like Kamala Harris lost. Or I don't know if he'd say that, but like why would you advocate for that if that's not the reason that you think she lost, or at least it didn't contribute to it? So like Cenk is
mm.
adamant that it's the support of trans people, which is that cost Kamala Harris the election, and like that's kind of why I've been on this whole the fringe of the progressive movement doesn't really matter because Kamala Harris never supported trans people and people didn't vote because of trans people. People voted because of economics and
Wait,
democracy and
well,
immigration.
people, I don't think, voted for trans people, but I think people on the right
Yeah,
absolutely voted against it, right? Like, they ran that. I think that was a really effective ad. Trump is for you, she's for they, them, right?
right.
Like, even though that's, you're right, like you said, she was not really talking about trans people in her campaign. Like, that was the message that comes across. And when you're bombarded with libs of TikTok and like, look, they're pushing trans on our children, and they're doing all this crazy trans ideology. Like, it doesn't matter if you talk about it because the framing's already there. So, to a
Well,
degree, I don't think Schenk is 100% incorrect. I do think that, especially on the trans sports issue, And even people who are pro-trans and pro-progressive and saying, "Hey, let people do what they want," acknowledge that, hey, a lot of these things are sex segregated, and they either don't know how the science pans out, or they're not sure that it is in the favor of saying, hey, biological born males who transition still have advantages that would kind of disregard the categories that we
Mm-hmm.
have already set. So I talked about that in the video. I was like, look, if you want to like redefine the categories or like show significant data that shows that this doesn't matter, sure. But like when people hear that and they hear biological man, woman, sport, like that to just even outside of any political agenda just sounds wrong to people. And
Yeah.
like if that's your main message, which it wasn't, but if it is and people hear that, they're like, well, this person is clearly like unreasonable. You don't have to be politically engaged to hear that and think that's unreasonable, because it does on its face sound like a little bit like, oh well, I'm not sure if that makes sense, and that does push people away. It's unfortunate, but that's just how it works. So he's not like, yeah, obviously, like Kamala Harris can't come out here and every speech be like, oh yeah, trans women shouldn't be in men's sports, or whatever the fuck they say. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not how the messaging should work, but it also shouldn't be what people are promoting if that's like, first of all, not as important as, like you said, progressive policies like housing and all this other stuff. It is potentially harmful. It's just, you have to be very careful about how you navigate those conversations and where you promote them, how you denounce them, because you also don't want to hurt the trans community, right? Like
Yeah.
even me saying that, like I don't want to come out and be like, yeah, trans women should just be excluded from everything, right? But I'm just acknowledging that those points do sway people one way or the other, and Cenk is one of those people who might see that rhetoric a lot in the bubble that he's in, so he's worried about it. In the same way Anna complained about probably something also irrelevant. They said on my medical form I was a, what was it, a
A
woman with
birthing
ovaries
person.
or a birthing person, right? And
That's
it's
so
like,
funny.
who fucking cares? Like, it's not that important. But it's the same thing with the video game diversity or the movie diversity. It's like, well, that made you slightly uncomfortable, and if that's what affects your day to day life, that's what you're going to vote on,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So it does matter. It's just it shouldn't, but it does. That's
I
the
mean,
reality.
again, my argument's kind of boring, but I would push back against that and say the people that are like consuming the media that says trans women are playing in women's sports and that's a big issue. Those people are voting for Donald Trump anyway. Or they're going to, like, if it's not trans people, it's going to
I
be
don't think they
something
are,
else.
though. I really don't think they are. So yes, obviously all the right wingers who hear that, who are going to vote for Donald Trump, are saying that. Don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong. But there are people, and let me, I mean, this is again anecdotal. You can talk to my parents. Like my dad is like the libest of libs. Like he likes new Stephen Colbert. He has the Donald syndrome. Like he
Okay.
is very, very lib. And my uncles as well. And they are die hard. Like I will crawl over broken glass and cactuses to go vote for Kamala Harris. But when they hear, hey, we should let trans women in women's sports, they're like, well, I mean, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, because
Okay,
like
but
that's
did they
sex
vote
segregated.
for Donald Trump because of
No,
it?
that didn't sway them. But what I'm telling you is that even the most like diehard libs, if it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to them, then there is a swath of moderate voters who that's like, all right, look, I agree with these economic policies, but this the one thing over here is insane. And yeah, you're playing into the Republican game by even talking about it, because like it is not a big deal
Right.
in the long run. It might be if there were like a shit ton of trans people, and you're like, okay, well now
Dude,
I
that
guess the
makes sports so
reasons
much better.
well, yeah. Well, let's be clear. Sports are dumb and boring, and like God bless trans women for trying to make them more interesting. But what I'm saying is, like, all right, if the point of I've had people push back on me for this that say, look, some sports are sex segregated because of misogyny, and some are segregated for X Y Z reason. But like on its face, most people would like, and this I'm going to say common sense, which is a
Yeah.
misnomer
It's
because
like,
there's no such
you know,
thing. But like most people know that in general, on average, athlete men are going to be bigger, have more muscle, and then it's like, okay, well, if you just say that you're a woman now, or you just get some hormones, but it doesn't change your body structure, like it kind of defeats the purpose of sex segregation. So that's going to seem off to them, and there's
right.
a non-zero amount of people who are going to hear that and say, well, if you're pushing for that, that makes you sound unreasonable. I don't want to vote for you anymore. And so, whether or not you agree that they should be able to participate, you have to at least acknowledge why that sounds unreasonable to them, explain why it's not a big deal, explain why you're going to work around it, or if you want to double down and say, "Look, I'm okay with that," then say that. But like,
Okay, but
understand that that does matter.
who specifically are you talking about that should fight against that narrative? Like progressive commentators like Emma Vigeland talking about it, or Kamala Harris devoting like a 20-minute section of her interview to it? Like,
I that yeah, it's gonna be
because
different for
when we
everyone.
talk
Like
about like,
obviously, I don't die on that hill because I'm just like, who gives a shit, right? Like in the long run, we've already spent way too much time talking about this. Like even in this conversation, like I'm just like, what? It doesn't really matter. But as part of the grand, bigger conversation of like how much time do you dedicate to these like ostensibly irrelevant grievances? Like
mhm.
as much time as it takes to convince the person you're talking to. So if I'm in a one-on-one conversation with someone who
Yeah,
really
but we're
disagrees
talking
with me,
about, if we're talking about elections, like
all
it
right, well
works
here,
in a different way.
I agree, and it's on a spectrum, right? So like when I'm talking to like someone who they're like, I want to vote for the Dems, but this one trans woman in sports thing, that's got me like a little
Yeah,
upset. That's then I'm gonna spend all day talking about it, right?
yeah, that's
Emma
reasonable.
Vigeland should probably dedicate next to zero amount of time talking about it because it really doesn't matter in the long run. And like promoting LGBT rights is much more important, and making sure these people are protected and safe, that's much more important. But if someone asks about it, spend 5-10 minutes being like, hey, this is my take on it, whether, whatever her take is. And if Kamala Harris, same thing, like probably don't want to talk about it that much. It's just not a big deal. And there's so many more important things to win over more voters. But if you're in an interview and someone asks, I mean, if let's say I was running for president, I would say what I think. I'd say, hey, look, like, a lot of sports are sex segregated for certain reasons. Maybe we need to reevaluate that. I want trans people to be included, and I don't want them to feel left out. And it's not as big of a deal. There's not that many trans athletes, but let's make sure that we're being fair to everyone. I think that would resonate so much better than ignoring it completely or saying trans woman or woman, period, end of story, because both of those are just shutting down the conversation.
Hmm.
And yeah, you can't dedicate a whole campaign cycle to trans issues because it's just not as important as like the economy,
Yeah.
but you
Okay.
can't ignore it.
I agree with what you're saying there, where like you can address it if you're directly asked about it. And then the other thing that, I mean, the one thing that I would add to this is if you do have progressive policies, which again, I made the point that if you're like talking about broad sweeping changes, people are going to want to talk about that. And
Hmm.
when Kamala Harris isn't talking about that stuff, and I don't know if she was even asked about trans women in women's sports, but let's say she
Probably
was,
not.
um,
Yeah.
that's what people are going to pay attention to. But if she
Hmm.
is talking about, like, let's get rid of the capital owners or whatever, like tax the 1% to hell, then I just don't know if there would be room to also talk about, well, she said we need to treat trans women with respect, and we need to talk about that. Uh,
I think there is. I think there is room for it because obviously they're going to clip every little thing you say. And I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I know at least Tim Waltz did something like this, if not also Kamala. But it was just someone asked a question about something ultra specific,
mhm.
and just to fill in the gap because I don't remember what it was, it might as well have been her saying this, like, look, I think that trans women face a lot of pressure today and they need to be treated with fairness, and we have to find ways to include everyone, but that's not what's important because the Trump campaign's really focusing on this, but what's
Yeah.
really important is how everyone's life in America is. Like they did some answer like that,
Hmm.
and they refocused it completely. They didn't dismiss it. It was a good job. It was a really good answer, and I that's what needs to happen for these not as important things. Like, yeah, address it, don't dismiss it, say why it is or is not important, give a good position, and then refocus the conversation on what really matters, which is the things that affect everyone, right? Everyone's affected by the economy, trans people, not trans people,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's what needs to happen. But I'm also being, an armchair political analyst right
Right.
now. I
Yeah,
would
of
have
course.
fucking tanked the campaign because someone would ask me a question and I
What,
would
are
have
you
been,
a YouTuber or something? Like,
you a YouTuber, hey, in this video you censored yourself saying the N word. Did you really say it out loud? And I'm like, so like,
all right, let's stay away from there. Or
yeah,
the N word is nuclear. That's the
yeah, the
new N
nuclear.
word.
That's my. Oh my God, I can't believe Trump said that and got away with it. He's like, they don't want me to say the N word, but it's my N word. It's nuclear, and I'm like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
this should be played everywhere. But that was. I mean, God, I hate that I find him funny because if he wasn't so damaging, he
Oh
would
my
be.
God.
He could be such a force for good. That's not what I
He
think,
is
but he's
funny.
not.
Like,
So.
I just want him to have. Did you ever see that show, House of Villains, where
I didn't.
they get like the worst people from every reality TV show, and they just put them in a house together, and they're just like
All of them?
shitty to each other. Well,
They
like
put
12 people in a season.
well, I'm just saying everyone who's on reality TV is the
Yeah.
worst. But yeah,
Oh yeah, all of
no, I
them.
haven't. What's
No, but
is that?
I just
Was he
want
on it?
no, I want him to just host that show. It would be amazing. Like if they're like Donald Trump, listen, we don't want you to be the president, but we're gonna give you this reality TV show, and you can be the star of it, and it's just gonna be you shitting on people the entire time. I think he would take that in a heartbeat. We're not gonna put you in
Yeah,
prison. You can just be the king of your own little
that's his plea
world.
deal.
Yeah, that's his plea deal.
Yeah,
0 years,
you
no
go away
presidency, but
forever,
a
and
reality TV show hosting job.
I mean, that was his original plan, right? Was like I wasn't going to win 2016, and
Yeah,
he was
that's
going to
what I've
start like a
heard.
TV channel. So yeah, you're not wrong. But the problem is now he has the opportunity and obviously the ability to win
Well,
and be
yeah,
president.
and
So
he's
that's what he
getting
has. He has
zero
his own
views.
reality TV show. It's called America, and he gets to shit on people every day and also have all the power. So
Yeah, that's true.
uh, unfortunately, we are not in the bargaining position there. He won. So yeah.
Um, well, damn, how much time do you have? Do you want to call it here? Because I feel like we kind of went through the main points of like of what we were thinking of talking about. Um,
Yeah, yeah, this is a good time to wrap up. I think we really covered everything and I enjoyed it. But I'd love to have more conversations,
yeah,
especially
I want
if you
to
want to
too.
talk about
And
I yeah.
and then when we're talking about like we should have kind of apolitical content, that is something that I want to do more of too. And I think it would be fun if there's like a network of kind of like-minded content creators. And I don't know, do you play video games or board games or something like that?
Yeah, I play
We
both
could
of
do
those.
stuff
If you
like
start
that.
a video game board game channel, I'll hop in there. I'm not toxic per se, but I get a little excited, so
Oh my
fair
god.
warning.
One of the last board
Um
games I played, I got so salty because like my friend just targeted me and killed me immediately. I'm like, well, now you're gonna lose because the other person's gonna beat you, and then he ended up
yeah.
winning. I'm like, okay, touche.
I like a good friendly ribbing, but like I'm not a League of Legends player or anything crazy like
Oh my
that.
god.
So
Yeah, but anyway, thanks for talking. This was fun because like I've been talking by myself, and I do appreciate the constructive criticism, and like obviously everyone does get into their own little bubble, and so having that bubble popped every now and then is a good thing.
yeah, hell yeah. And I mean, we're almost a Venn diagram. I'm sure there's
Oh
very
yeah,
little like exclusive
a
policies, but
Venn diagram of just a
um,
circle.
yeah, I'm sure you're like slightly left of me, but yeah, same both ways. And like, hey, if you're gonna do your, I think what you post like a video every day or something, you're like really spitting out the content. So if you want to react to my videos too, go ahead. I'm sure
Yeah,
that'll
I was
give me
thinking doing
something to
that.
think about.
That'll be fun.
Maybe they'll leave the left one, and then I can feel bad about all my takes. But yeah, do I plug myself? Do I say, hey,
Yeah,
go
go
watch
plug
this Soy
yourself.
Pill?
I'll link your channel in the description of the video, and then hopefully people that enjoyed hearing you talk. Well, I mean, your videos are much more succinct than mine. I'd say it's not like 2.5 hours of
Well, we've been
rambling.
talking speaking of, we've been
Oh
talking for
yeah,
an hour and
shit.
40 minutes. So like, yeah, like I think you were like, well, we could do like a 40-minute combo. I'm like, we could go for, I'm sure we'll go longer for that. Like if you asked me to stay for another 2 hours, I would. I just have plans after too. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, check out my stuff on the Soy Pill if you like my opinions, or if you hate my opinions,
The
like and
soy
subscribe
pill.
anyway. And yeah, I hope we can talk more soon. I like what you have to say. I like your conversation tactics, and I really I feel like we had a good back and forth here where yes, even when we disagreed, like I really felt like you were listening to me and you could acknowledge what I'm saying without completely agreeing with it, which is such an important thing today. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it
let's
was
talk
fun.
more.
All right, man. Thanks for hopping on, and be in touch.